The most productive developers I know rarely feel like they're working hard. It's not because they're geniuses, it's because they've closed the gap between thinking and doing. For 30 days, I tried to close that gap myself. I built something every single day, not to launch a product, not to impress anyone, just to see what would happen to my mind, my code, and my relationship with the work. Daily challenges are everywhere. They promise transformation in 30 days. I'm not going to promise that. Instead, I want to share what actually changed when I removed all excuses and simply sat down to build each evening. No 0 days, no waiting for motivation, just a small commitment, held lightly, repeated. I gave myself 3 rules. First, build meant shipping something, even if that something was a single function, a UI fragment or a broken prototype. Second, it had to be shared, even if only with myself in a private repo log. Third, no single session could exceed 2 hours. I wasn't chasing volume, I was chasing rhythm. What follows is not a productivity system. It's a series of quiet observations from 30 days of consistent low-stakes making. If you've ever felt stuck between great ideas and frozen fingers, you might find something useful here. The first week, lower the bar until it's almost embarrassing. The first 3 days felt powerful. I sketched out a project I'd been thinking about for months, a tiny tool to analyze my own writing patterns. I was convinced this sprint would finally be the one that stuck. Day 4 hit, and my energy collapsed. A long workday left me with nothing. My grand plan required too many decisions, so I did the only thing I could think of. I built the smallest possible version of something else entirely. I wrote a shell script that opened my daily notes folder and displayed a random line from a file of affirmations. It took 12 minutes. The code was ugly. I shipped it anyway. That tiny pivot taught me the most important lesson of the entire month. The bar for done needs to be absurdly low, low enough that you can clear it on your worst day. When the goal is build a feature, your tired brain will negotiate its way out. When the goal is write and commit 10 lines of working code, resistance softens. The ambition isn't in the daily output, it's in the chain you're forging. I began ending each session with a sticky note. Tomorrow's task is so small I can't fail. The next day, that note met me at the desk with permission instead of pressure. The messy middle, perfect as a wall, shipped as a door. Around day 10, my daily log looked ugly. Not aesthetically, although the code was ugly too, but psychologically. I had built fragments that didn't connect, experiments that led nowhere, and plenty of things that felt like wasted time. Old me would have interpreted this as failure. The inner critic had a loud voice. This isn't impressive. You're not learning if you're not building something polished. But something shifted when I looked back at the log. Each messy entry was a decision made, a tiny hypothesis tested. The habit, not the artifact, was the product. I began treating every session like a brushstroke in a painting I couldn't yet see. I wrote a function that solved a problem I didn't have, just to understand a library. I refactored a piece of code that already worked, just to feel how it could be simpler. Nothing was wasted, because everything was practice. One evening, I spent 30 minutes building a to-do list component I had no intention of using. It was purely for the feel of the code. And in that playful, non-judgmental space, I noticed something. My fingers moved faster, my mind found patterns more easily, and I smiled at the screen. The mess was not a sign of failure. It was evidence of momentum. The unexpected side effect: your brain stops hoarding ideas. By day 17, a strange inner quiet had appeared. Normally, my mind is a crowded room of project ideas, each one yelling, "Pick me." The pressure to build something great kept me from starting anything at all. But daily making changed the economics of ideas. When you know you will build again tomorrow, you don't need today's idea to be the one. That idea can be small, it can be boring, it can even be a duplicate of yesterday's attempt, because repetition is how neural pathways harden. The urgency evaporates. I started noticing that ideas came more freely, and I let them go more easily. If something interested me, a new pattern for error handling, a UI animation technique. I'd just build a tiny sandbox around it that evening. No need to attach it to a grand architecture. The act of building became the primary experience, not the vehicle to some future outcome. This is the opposite of what hustle culture teaches. It says ideas are precious, and you must execute relentlessly before someone else does. But daily, low-stakes building says, ideas are abundant, and your job is to channel them into calm, consistent output. The best ones will surface naturally. The rest will drift away without guilt. The hardest days, when life doesn't cooperate. Days 22 through 26 were brutal. Unexpected deadlines at work, a family obligation that drained my evening, a headache that made screens feel hostile. The streak was in danger, and the old all-or-nothing mindset whispered, "You've missed too much, just give up." I reminded myself of the original rule, no 0 days. But I also redefined what zero meant. I couldn't write code, so I wrote a design doc, 3 paragraphs describing a future feature. Another night I recorded a voice memo analyzing a bug I'd encountered, then transcribed it into my notes. Not a single line of code was committed, but I had built understanding. That counts. The practice became elastic. It had to bend so it wouldn't break. On the hardest day, I spent 15 minutes organizing my project board. I moved cards, pruned stale tasks, and wrote a single question I wanted to answer the next morning. That tiny act kept the chain alive without punishing me for being human. What I learned: consistency isn't about never missing. It's about making the missed days so small that they slip by without breaking your identity as someone who builds. You are not your streak. You are the person who returns to the desk. Day 30. What stays when the streak ends? I finished the month not with a product launch, but with a quiet sense of agency. My side project had progressed, yes, but more importantly, I had unwired a circuit that had held me back for years. Before this experiment, I believed that deep creative work required long, uninterrupted blocks and a burst of inspiration. Now I know it mostly requires showing up in a small way, consistently, and trusting that compound effort will rearrange your mind in ways you can't predict. I'm not going to build every single day from now on. That was never the point. The point was to install a new default. When in doubt, make something tiny. The resistance you feel before starting is not a signal to stop. It's just weather, and you can sail through weather. If I were to distill the month into one principle, it's this. The volume of small, safe completions destroyed my fear of starting. The code doesn't need to be good. The idea doesn't need to be original. The session doesn't need to be long. It just needs to happen. So here's the single actionable takeaway, not as a to-do list, but as an invitation. For the next week, not even 30 days, try this. At the end of each day, open your editor and build one tiny thing. It can be a single function, a CSS animation, a test case, a query you're curious about. Ship it, log it, and walk away. Don't judge the quality. Don't plan ahead. Just see how it feels to close the gap between intention and action, one small step at a time. You might find, as I did, that the calm of daily making is far more powerful than the adrenaline of occasional heroics. And that calm, once you taste it, changes everything. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing. No urgency, just an invitation to build in peace, together. Thanks for watching. Go build something.